What are your thoughts on whether or not somebody should trust their gut instinct or not?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I mean, it's the sixth sense that we all have. So if you're walking down the street and something doesn't feel right, maybe you think you're being followed, or maybe you're going to a restaurant and you're like, something just doesn't seem right. I shouldn't walk in this restaurant. That's a no-brainer. Always trust your gut. It's not going to lead you wrong. It's there for a reason.
And how does somebody know if it's actually their gut talking to them and it's not just fear?
That's a great point because obviously, with experience, your gut gets better. So the more you, whatever job you have, obviously me at the agency or a police officer, somebody in the military, or again, whatever line of profession somebody might be in, the more you learn things, the more your gut knows, hey, something doesn't add up where I'm going, or something doesn't look right on this operation, or whatever it might be. And when you're a brand new guy, I mean, when I was the newbie and didn't know anything, clearly your gut isn't the greatest because you're still like, I've never been in this situation before. I've never seen this before. And luckily, I was blessed to have amazing mentors, kind of thing. So, yeah, if you're starting out, I still lean towards trusting your gut. So, yes, it could be complete irrational fear. That's right. But I'm to the point right now these days where I'm going to be safe than sorry and just say, you know what? I'm not going to go down that alley at 3 a.m. in Baltimore City, Maryland, or, I'm not going to take that job because something just doesn't smell right.
And you mentioned the agency, and I think over the last, few years, you've seen more people in the personal development space interested in watching content, listening to podcasts from people who used to work in the agency. Like, what do you think it is about the agency outside of like maybe some of the conspiracies or politics that people want to, would like to dive into? Like, what is it from a personal development, self-improvement standpoint that draw people to want to learn from people like yourself?
Well, I mean, at the agency, there's many things. First, you got to be an amazing salesman. There's a woman I know, a fellow agency officer, and I love this line. She would say, like, CIA officers are the world's best salespeople. The only difference is you sell vacuums and I sell treason. So you've got to have very good salesman skills. You've got to be able to interact with a bunch of different people. So it doesn't matter if you're interacting with some ambassador or somebody in a third world country. People from all walks of life is where I'm going with that. A buddy of mine says you've got to be a chameleon, and not chameleon in a bad way where you're taking advantage of people, but you've got to be as comfortable in the backwoods of middle of nowhere talking to somebody as you are with the billionaire in the world's finest restaurant. And agency people have those skills. Another one is the art of elicitation, which is just a fancy way of saying extracting information you want from somebody. And that is a skill that agency people are very good at. And anybody can learn, but again, the agency teaches you that stuff, which is why the average American is now like, hey, I want to watch this YouTube channel on agency people because they have a lot of skills that apply to everyday life.
Yeah, and like what you just said kind of reminds me of something else that people want, and that is like true self-confidence, at least the ability to persuade people that they are confident. What are some tips that you could share for people to develop self-confidence?
Well, I'll tell you, preparation is the key. You've got to do a tremendous amount of preparation. So before you're going on a knot, before you're doing anything in life, you've got to prepare, right? So the story I like to tell about this is I was very blessed to go on the television show Shark Tank several years ago. And I practiced my pitch literally over 1,000 times. I watched every single television interview the Sharks had ever been on. I read every book they'd ever wrote. So I knew the questions they're going to ask. I knew about them. I knew about their families. And I ended up getting a deal when everybody said, no, you're a service. You're a word service. You're never going to get a deal. They like products. So it goes back to the deep research, makes it much easier to have confidence because you've already done the homework. And when you do that reconnaissance, surveillance, deep research, then you're like, yeah, I've got this because I know everything about this person. Or I know everything about this job or whatever I'm trying to get.
And then when it comes to like personal stuff, like whether people are, I've covered things like dating and relationships on the podcast and conversation techniques and maybe things that aren't as easy to prepare for. It's not like you can do a deep dive on somebody's entire history and for somebody you may meet when going on a date or something like that. But for like more, I guess, real world situations, personal situations in conversation, what are some like practical ways that you think people can appear confident when they're interacting with other people?
Well, the oldie but the goodie is shut up and listen, right? We all know everybody's selfish. Everybody likes to talk about themselves. So just listen to people and ask questions. And here's the kicker. Act like you don't care. And what I mean by is not act like, oh, somebody just told me I don't care. I mean, just ask questions and don't be like, oh my gosh, I hate it or whatever. No, just ask questions and be interested. And so have a more, maybe act like you don't care is not the best way to phrase it, but have more a neutral tone. Like you're just trying to get them to know them. You're curious. You're not being judgmental. You're not trying to bring up politics. You're not trying to, bring up their religion and argument. You're just a really interested human being trying to get to know this person. And so I've been on, I'll tell you a funny, crazy story. So when I was single, I used some lie detection skills to first vet out some crazy people. And one time I'm talking to this girl and I didn't know this at the time. And she says, hey, I'm a stripper, right? So what does every guy do who should probably tells us she's a stripper? Everybody's probably like, oh, that's the most amazing thing in the world. That's super hot. Or they're like, oh, that's disgusting. I'd never touch you with a 10-foot pole. I would never bring you home to whatever. I was completely neutral. I'm like a poker player and blank. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, how long you been just like acting like she told me she worked at Dunkin' Donuts and all that kind of stuff. So that catches people off guard and they're like, whoa, he's not judging me. He's not whatever. And that sucks them in to you be able to elicit more information from them. So basically, don't do what everybody else is going to do. Again, in that stripper example, everybody's going to have a totally left field thing, or this is the greatest thing in the world, come home and sleep with me, or this is the worst thing in the world, I bet you have an STD, don't touch me. And I was just like nonchalant, like she told me again, she worked at Dunkin' Donuts, like, oh, so how long have you been working there? And that throws them off guard. And they're like, well, wait a minute. Why isn't he having a reaction? Why isn't he? And that sucks them into you more and more.
So is the key to developing relationships? We talked about sales, right? And I think everybody has to be good at sales in some area of their life. They're going to have to use that skill, whether it's in a personal or professional situation. Do you think the big thing that moves the needle with that is the ability to ask great questions?
Yes, absolutely. You also, of course, got to have empathy. You got to, understand where that person's coming from. You can't just be there for the sale. Meaning you can't come off the slick salesman, the used car salesman who's like, yep, I really don't give a crap about you and this and that. And I'm going to just push it, not actually read your body language, read your tone of voice, see what you really need. So a buddy of mine, another agency buddy of mine, one of my mentors says, like, I'm trying to think of the way he phrased it, but he says, everybody has proclivities. You got to find out what people's proclivities are. And so what he means is like, everybody's got something that makes them vulnerable. Maybe some guys like hookers. Maybe some guys like cocaine. Maybe some guys like baseball tickets to the best seats at the baseball game. Like everybody has something that they want, and you figure out what it is and you give it to them. And so most people, when they're trying to sell, again, they're only thinking of themselves. They're thinking of, hey, I want to make this $500 commission, and I don't really give a crap. So when I'm selling, and it's different from when I'm dating. Dating is dating is different. Dating, I'm coming off more, like I said, nonchalant, like I'm playing hard to get in a way. Where selling, I am really sitting there listening, seeing, okay, what does this guy really care about? I'll give you a short example of a long story. Agency was trying to recruit a guy who was overseas, really wanted him to spy on behalf of the US. And what this guy ended up wanting and sealed the deal was books for his children to read. He lived in a terrible, craphole country where you couldn't get in books because they were banned. And so getting this guy a copy of Catcher in the Rye and all the classics that we read in high school and elementary school and whatnot, that was the greatest thing in the world. And that's what he wanted. And that's what sealed the deal. So you got to find out what people truly want.
Well, I want to get back to the conversation stuff and detecting whether or not somebody's lying or being manipulative in a minute. But you had a video that was pretty popular about like places you would recommend sleeping if you're living in your car. And we don't need to necessarily go into the details of that, but there's people who listen to my show who have been at rock bottom moments in their life where maybe they don't have access to live in the home that they used to live in, or maybe they don't have access to a lot of money. What tips do you have from a survival standpoint if somebody like is in the depths of despair and doesn't have a lot, going on in their life?
That is a great question. I mean, I've been incredibly blessed in life. I've never been homeless. I've always had a food on my table, roof over my head and my back. Through training and other various sundry things, I've been in some crappy places. I basically slept as a homeless person and all that kind of stuff. And obviously it's not fun. But you know what I tell people is a lot of the times, again, sleeping in the car and whatever is, and this is 100% true. Hopefully they're a Christian. And when I say that is hopefully they have a God, whatever God that is, Again, I'm a Christian, but you got to trust in the Lord. So that is very important that you get out of that. And I tell people, like, listen, guys, go find a church. There's a million churches. They help people, they take them in, but tell the truth and stay out of bad places when you get caught. Meaning, if you are sleeping, just using this example, if you're sleeping on a bench and a police officer comes up, be 100% polite, tell them the truth, always kill people with kindness. So I've been in situations where people come up and they're being rude to me. And listen, I'm human. I want to rip their face off, right? But escalating that is going to lead to nowhere good, especially when you're dealing with a police officer. And I say that as a former police officer because I joined the police force before I joined the CIA. So killing people with kindness will get you far. Always saying thank you, please. Hey, I totally understand. Hey, I'm having a real bad time, which is why I'm on this bench right now. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause you problems or whatever. Just killing people with kindness. And obviously, it helps if you actually mean it. You're trying to be kind on purpose and you're a good person. But no matter what, it will get you very far. It will help you to have them help you. I mean, I tell this story about flattery works. So, we all think, no, I'm too smart. Nobody's going to flatter me. Well, again, I can tell you of intelligence operations. Somebody's casing a building overseas, right? So you're looking up, you're trying to case a building. Police officer in that country comes over and says, like, what in the heck are you doing? And you're like, you know what? I love this country. It is so beautiful. I was just admiring the architecture. I mean, look how beautiful this skyline in this country is that you live in. I love it. And they're like, yes, our country is beautiful. Have a good day. Sounds corny, but it works.
If you were flat broke and had like the super limited funds but you wanted to make sure you were fully nourished, like what types of foods would you buy that were going to be the healthiest for you while also, not having the ability to go bad?
That is a great question. Before I answer that, I want to tell you if I was flat broke, what I would do. Only because I go to Texas about every single month, either to Austin or Dallas on business. And I've had these conversations with people. Hey, what would you do if you're flat broke? Well, Texas, for whatever reason, again, I'm not a Texan, but they have these car washes. And I call them like almost homeless people car washes where somebody's put a tarp over a building. They look all run down, but you drive up there and it's a hand car wash, meaning they'll wash your car, they'll detail your car, they'll wash it. They've got their lawn chairs out. And it is not professional at all. I mean, it's just a couple of guys sitting out there and you're like, this building looks like it's about to fall apart. I would go work in one of those places. I would start one of those places. When I went with a buddy to get his car washed at one of these places, because I was so curious because they're all over, I'm sitting in this building that has a couch that looks like it's been in a frat house, and I'm probably going to get an STD sitting on, but I sat down on anyways. And so I look over, and there's a little nightstand next to this couch, and it's got a clipboard on it with numbers. So I glance over, and it says like Ford Taurus, $100, Dodge van, $50, Ford truck, $100. And I look, and I was probably there around noon, and this guy already had $700 worth of sales in cash. He only takes cash, and he's not paying taxes on all that money. So if I was broke, I would do one of those kind of jobs where you're just underground, getting cash, working a car wash. As far as foods, I mean, it's obviously a very tough spot because you're probably not going to have refrigeration. You're not going to have a lot of that type of stuff where you've got a whole kitchen. So it's not going to be the world's healthiest. It's going to be using propane cooking stoves. Get a mess kit, get a propane stove, get some pasta, you can get some cans of soup or whatever. And you can get a lot of meals with a small propane stove that take the green canister, and it'll sustain you. Again, it's not 4-star or 5-star dining, but it'll work.
I remember when inflation was going up and people were worried about the economy and what was going on with that. Like one of my really good friends who was in the special operations for a long time, he was like, hey, you should get yourself like a 30-day supply of food just to make sure you're okay. And so I got like canned green beans, canned chicken, canned tuna, which I've never used. It's like sitting underneath my counter, and I've essentially had to start throwing some of it away because it's been sitting there for a while. Do you think people are being too overly cautious, with that stuff? Like, should people be like prepared in that way? Or, I mean, are you confident that we'll never get to that point?
Well, overly cautious, let me tell you overly cautious. I have over a year's supply of survival food for my wife and 7 kids. So that makes 9 of us in our family. It is a heck of a lot of survival food. I have the survival food pouches. I have the number 10 cans. And so here's what I tell people. Many years ago, very long story, but ex-business partner stole a tremendous amount of money from me. I lost everything, almost had to file bankruptcy. I mean, I had to sell my house. I mean, it was very low. We lived off of our food storage. So I tell people, like, listen, it may be a grid down scenario, which I believe is going to happen one day. It could be some, worldwide event, but most likely it's going to be a personal crisis where you're going to need your food storage, which is what happened to me. I had a cousin, same thing happened to him. My cousin lost his job. They had to live off of their food storage. I know people that have medical problems have to live off of it. So that's why I think it is, because I want to be as self-reliant as possible so I don't have to rely on anybody. And we were able to get through that horrible situation because of the emergency savings I had, because of the food storage I had, because of all the preps. So everything paid off.
And so what can the average person, like if they want to have like a little like like a stash of survival food, is it like a kit you buy, or do you buy like canned goods that are non-perishable?
So you start with the food you have in your house, right? You obviously start with canned goods you have in your pantry, you have in your refrigerator. That is tier one. Tier two, the survival food pouches. So, my company sells those survival food pouches, and those are, a meal bag, very easy to cook and all that. Then I talk about tier three, or the number 10 cans. So that's a number 10 can full of rice, or they have pasta, or they have apple slices, or whatever. And then tier four is the 5 gallon buckets, where you've got rice poured into a 5 gallon bucket. Well, you pour it into a Mylar bag first so it lasts forever. So pour into a Mylar bag, seal the bag. But I have 5 gallon buckets in my basement full of the wheat, full of the rice, full of the beans, and all that kind of stuff. So I always say, like, listen, as I just said, I have over a year's supply of food for my wife and 7 kids. We obviously did not start out that way. We spent a long time building it up. So just build up a little bit slowly, but I would recommend you get to 30 days as soon as you can, because there may be some event where you do have to survive for 30 days.
I think that's wild that you have that much food, but it makes sense, like given like your background and like what you talk about. I'd love to get back to conversation stuff. You used some of your lie detection skills back in the day for something. What do you think are some of the most effective ways to tell if somebody's lying to you?
So I'll give you two. We'll start with the first one. I just call it paying attention to the first 3 to 5 seconds. And what does that mean? As human beings, we're not great liars. We're not born to lie. So if I ask somebody, well, first of all, you baseline, and meaning if I'm hiring somebody from my company, they come into my office, we sit down, I'm like, oh, hey, Jack, where are you from? How's the weather today? What sports do you like, right? Baseline them, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. Then out of left field, you say, Jack, tell me the last time you stole something. Not a question they expect. Most people give a normal, honest reaction that a human being is going to give, a non-liar. They're going to say, oh, well, in 6th grade, I stole candy from the supermarket. Or in high school, I used to steal money out of my parents' wallet, right? Normal reactions. And they look normal in the face. They don't look nervous. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for somebody who stutters because they're trying to buy time for their brain to come up with a lie. And I'm looking for someone who gets a deer in the headlight look, like, oh, crap, I'm nervous he just asked me that. Where an innocent person wouldn't be nervous. They'd say that, hey, I stole Snickers candy bars from the supermarket in 8th grade or whatever. So one time I was interviewing somebody, a woman. I said, tell me the last time you stole something. And she got the deer in the headlights look in her face. She was nervous. She was like, well, and I was like, hey, listen, we've all stole stuff. We've all made mistakes. And she said, for my previous employer, I was a bookkeeper. I stole a ton of bookkeeping supplies because I wanted to set up a competing bookkeeping business, but I decided I didn't want to do that. Now I need a job. Now, obviously, I did not hire that woman, but pay attention to the first 3 to 5 seconds. Do they have a nervous look on their face? Are they stuttering? Are they hemming and hawing? Or do they give an immediate normal answer like an honest person would do? So that is number one.
So is the eye contact thing, is that a myth? Like if somebody looks to the right or something?
So it depends if they're left-handed or right-handed, and it's not always easy to see. So I teach a lie detection course, and I do not teach that because it doesn't work all the time. The things I teach are much more obvious. Here's another obvious one, is I call it the freeze. If somebody does something dishonest, they kind of want to freeze and not draw attention to themselves because they think like, hey, if I don't move, then Jason's never going to know it's me. So I'll give you an example. This is literally what I tell when I teach a seminar is, hey, if I went to the bathroom, I come back and let's say my wallet was on a table, I come back, it's missing, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm angry and I'm like, hey, you guys, I'm trying to teach this course. My wallet's missing. I'm looking around for the person who freezes most. Because everybody else is going to be like, oh, Jason, I didn't take your wallet, or hey, Jason, we'll help you look for it, or hey, Jason, we didn't see what happens. But I'm looking for the person who's trying to retract on their tortoise shell and be like, if I don't move, Jason will never know it's me. I will not draw any attention to myself. So here's the $1,000,000 example. I'm on an airplane once. Somebody passes gas, is the best way I can say it. Smells horrific. I'm looking around this airplane like, holy smokes, there is a dead body in this plane. I mean, it smelled horrible. I'm looking all around. And as I'm doing this, I'm noticing everybody else in my vicinity is doing the same thing. They're like, oh my gosh, where the smell, where's it coming from? Which is normal human behavior. However, everybody around my vicinity is doing that except one guy. To my left, about 2 seats up, there's this guy who's just sitting there like this, not moving whatsoever. He's not exhibiting that normal human behavior. Most likely, he's the guy that passed the gas because he's the one who's freezing.
Got it. But isn't the opposite also true, where if somebody tries to come up with some crazy story, gets super defensive, they tend to not be telling the truth as well?
Yes. Yeah, I got a story for that one. So, good friend of mine, this was years ago, maybe 6 years ago now, finds a cell phone in her husband's car, like their third vehicle or whatever. And she picks it up. There's one number in there. She calls the number. A woman hangs up, right? Immediately. And so she calls me and she tells me this story. And I'm like, hey, Sally, it doesn't really look, too good. It looks like he's having an affair. She's like, no, he's not having an affair. He would never do that. We have a great marriage. Everything's wonderful. I said, okay, do this. As soon as he gets home from work, tell him the exact same story you told me, which is true. You found this phone accidentally. A woman answered and hung up. Tell me what he says. Call me tomorrow. So she calls me the next day. And she's like, oh my gosh, Jason, I've never seen him so angry in his life. He was screaming and yelling and cussing, and he never cusses. Like, he was so mad that I dare even, disrespect our marriage by saying he was having an affair. I've never seen him so angry in his life. So I know he's not cheating on me. I said, hey, Sally, he's cheating on you. She was like, what do you mean? Jason, didn't you hear what I just said? I've never seen him so angry in his life. I've never seen him cussing and screaming. A guilty person is like a cat backed in the corner. They will try and scream and yell and go psycho on you. So they're like, I'm never going to ask again. I'm so sorry. But I'm married. Doug, are you married? You're not married, are you?
I'm engaged. Not
Congratulations.
Thank
Good
you,
deal.
thank you.
That's awesome. Well, if your fiance or my wife calls me right now on my flip phone and says, hey, Jason, are you cheating on me? First thing I'm going to do is make a joke, which she's not going to find funny. But that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to scream and yell. I'm not going to cuss. I'm not going to lose my mind because I'm not cheating on my wife. I have no guilt associated with it. So the fact that my friend's husband was going psycho, I knew he was guilty. Long story short is several months later, she did find out he was indeed cheating on her. Surprise. So yes, you're right. If somebody goes absolutely psycho, that's not normal human behavior, where an innocent person will be like, why the heck are you asking me if I'm cheating on you? What's going on? Because they have no guilt.
And what's the difference between lying and manipulation? Because I think sometimes those two terms get interchanged. Like, how do you know? Like, what's the difference between manipulation and lying?
Well, I mean, lying is outright lying. You're being dishonest. Where manipulation, you're trying to manipulate someone to get what you want them to do. So it goes back to the art of elicitation. If I'm trying to extract information from somebody, I want to find out their hot button. I want to find out, again, do they have a cocaine habit? Do they hate their wife and have a mistress? Do they have a child who, going back to the guy who got books and ended up spying for the agency, do they have a child that has books? Do they have a child with a health problem and really needs the best medical care, where you can say, hey, if you spy for the United States, we can most likely bring you over to the US and get your child in the best hospital in America to cure him of this ailment, right? So that is being, I think that's being more manipulative, because you're trying to find out what their vulnerabilities are, use them to have them spy for the United States or get what you want in whatever fashion.
And how can somebody, like the average person, maybe doesn't have the skills that you've developed throughout your career and what you do now to like tell if somebody's trying to manipulate them? Like, what are some of the signs that somebody could pick up on?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. The sixth sense. You can tell when something doesn't add up. I mean, I've been through it enough that I can tell pretty quickly something doesn't. I can see their body language. I can see they're not genuine. A lot of times what I do is just immediately ask for proof. Meaning, again, let's say somebody comes and says, hey, I've got the hottest stock tip in America and I made $50 billion last time. Invest in my cryptocurrency or stock, right? Show me your bank account. Show me your 50 million bucks. like that kind of stuff. So I think people are afraid to offend, and criminals use this all the time because they adapt to society and they don't want to offend anybody. But if somebody comes up to you and makes some promises or say they can do X and Y, say, show me proof. You're the world's best home builder. Show me the 17 custom homes you made and the people, show me where you've made them and happy customers. So I think a lot of people don't do that and are afraid to do that. But I have no problem doing that kind of stuff. And you get rid of these manipulators very easily, such as, again, whatever it might be, promising you the next stock tip, crypto, real estate deal of a lifetime. Say, okay, show me what you've done before, and that'll get them to go away.
There's some people that are incredibly gifted at being deceitful and manipulative. How is there any specific like tips you would provide somebody you were coaching on how to detect like even the best skilled person at manipulating people?
Yeah, so the guys that are really good are sociopaths
Yeah.
because I'm serious. I'm being dead serious. They're soulless. They could go stab somebody right in front of you and me, have blood all over their hands, and pass a polygraph and be like, no, I didn't stab anybody. What are you talking about? So you've got to be careful with those. And honestly, that's when it comes to background checks, asking questions, and proof. And I do this all the time. I do work with a lot of high net worth individuals, and they come to me and they say, hey, Jason, XYZ is going on. I need you to background check this person. And we do a very deep dive. And a lot of times, the fact that we say we're going to do it just scares them away. So, like, one of the things we do is CEOs or guys who own holding companies, right? They own a lot of holding companies. They're trying to hire a CEO for one of their companies, and we vet their CEOs. So you can say right off the bat, like, hey, John, we're going to do a background check on you. I'm former CIA. We do a very thorough background check. Is there anything you want to tell me now? Any reason we shouldn't do it? And, some guys will be like, you know what? I don't think I'm the right candidate for this job. Let me go. Seriously, you'll scare away people, right? So tell them the things you are going to do and say, hey, I have a lot of clients. And I just say, tell them you have somebody who's former CIA who works for you. And here's what they're going to do. And that will scare a lot of people off. So just simple things like that.
And then can the average person do like a thorough background check, or given like what you used to do you have access to
Yeah, I
different?
mean, you got to be licensed to and have access to it. So somebody hires me or hires a private investigator or somebody like that who can do the very thorough background checks.
Like what other things are people scared that you would find other than like criminal stuff?
Let's see. I'm trying to think. We had a guy one time who was a sex offender. So, he obviously was scared they're going to find that. You can find out how much money. You can find their financials. So I've had people who say, hey, this guy says he's worth $80 million. He wants to do a deal with me. Can you see if he's really worth $80 million? And we go check in and say, yes, he's legit. He has these type of assets and funds. So you can find out all kinds of stuff when you know how to dig.
Right. And, I think that, you kind of touched on this. People are afraid to confront people or to stand up for themselves, like in conversation when they know somebody is lying to them or deceiving them or whatever. And I think two things happen. I think the first thing is people get incredibly emotional, reactive, start yelling and screaming, and then that conversation just doesn't go anywhere. And the other side is they don't say anything, and then they just disrespect themselves, and they end up building resentment, or they end up like not doing the right thing in a situation that they should have done. How can people like stand up for themselves when somebody is lying to them and like move the conversation towards some sort of hopefully like agreement or something that doesn't necessarily like erupt within minutes?
So here's what I tell people when I do this. Every human being on earth has an ego. I have an ego. You have an ego. We all have egos, right? But I tell them, swallow your pride, swallow your ego. I have nothing left to prove to anybody these days. I have been incredibly blessed to do a lot. I prove myself to the people who know me. So if some guy, let's say I'm driving, some guy flips me the bird, thinks I've cut him off, yelling and screaming at me. Again, I'm a human, so I don't appreciate that. And I'd love to start yelling at him too, but I don't do anything. I'll smile and wave because I'm very well trained. I carry concealed every single day. Why do I want to get in a fight with somebody, some knucklehead, whatever? So I'm swallowing my pride, even though, again, I'm very well trained and I'm pretty sure, I'm confident that if a battle ensued, I would be the winner of it. But again, I want to avoid that at all costs because it's unnecessary. So I tell the people, if you see somebody lying or see someone doing whatever, you can realize it and you can just say, no, thank you. I'm not interested in that. Or that, that's great, but that doesn't seem a good fit for me. So I go back to killing people with kindness. I mean, if somebody tries with me, I'll just say, "Oh, that's fascinating." That, I'll play dumb because, again, I don't have an ego. I don't have anything to prove anybody, and I'll say, "Oh, no, thank you," and then I'll just walk away, or I'll just forget about it, or do something like that. So that's what I think we need to do. That would solve a lot of problems, because I think people feel like, no, I need to point it out that he's lying. I need to point out that I'm the bigger man and I'm smarter, or I'm this or that, or I'm whatever. And I'm like, no, I don't have anything to prove. If this guy wants to think he's smarter than me, or if he thinks I'm the world's biggest idiot, it doesn't matter to me.
This episode is brought to you by Carol Bike. If you know me, you'll know I don't like to waste time. I recently had the chance to chat with Carol Bike co-founder and CEO Ulrich Dempfli about the incredible benefits of REHIT, also known as reduced exertion high-intensity training, which is an innovative approach that the Carol Bike is designed to deliver. This game-changing method can help improve metabolic and cardiovascular health, all while requiring minimal time investment. Forget a one-size-fits-all fitness regime. What I love about the Carol Bike is it brings personalized workouts into your home, tailored to your unique fitness level and goals through cutting-edge AI technology. The number one limitation for my personal training clients over the years isn't money, it's time. Everyone is so busy with their personal professional lives, making it very difficult to allocate hours per week to exercise. So whether you're looking to improve cardiovascular fitness, lose weight, or simply stay active, Carol's scientifically validated approach ensures that you're getting the most out of every workout in 90% less time than traditional cardio. It's fitness that adapts to you and not the other way around. So experience the smart, effective way to stay fit with Carol Bike. So if you're looking to make the most of your cardio workouts, go to carolbike.com and use the code Doug at checkout for a nice discount off your bike. Again, go to carolbike.com or click the link below and use the code Doug for a nice discount off your bike. Now back to the show. What about if it's somebody where they're like, it's a family member or a friend that they have to interact with on a regular basis? Like, don't you think not, pointing out them not telling the truth is going to ultimately like destroy the relationship?
So that is a good point. Yeah, that is a good point you made. If we're talking about a family member, or if we're talking about somebody that you have to see daily, well, then yes, confront them. Now, I would not lie. I wouldn't get in an argument or whatever. I just call them out and stay silent. I'll say, like, hey, Bill, you said this, but you just proved to me that's not true. Like, what's going on? And then I'm silent again, and let them, when you're kind of like, let them explain to you, because I think the problem is people get so emotional, and then they keep going on and on. It's like, hey, Bill, I'm just making this up, obviously. Hey, Bill, you said you didn't take my wallet, but I found my wallet in your dresser drawer. How did that happen? And then see what happens, and you can take it from there, kind of thing. So nothing good comes out of the confrontation, because it just ends up at a shouting match, and you gather a lot more information. You're able to elicit a lot more if you, again, remain calm, play stupid, and just ask questions.
And then, like, giving that same example, what if, like, like you say you find your friend Bill, who you think stole your wallet, you find it in his drawer. He's like, no, I didn't do that. Like, you're lying. Like, somebody must have put it there. Like, what do you say to him that?
So I dig deeper. Again, I'm like, okay, so nobody, like, who do you think could have done it? Like, if you didn't take it, this really worries me that we got a thief in the house. So do you think, have you had any friends over? I mean, I keep pushing it and pushing it until they get very uncomfortable, and maybe they admit it, maybe they don't, but I don't let it go. So I say stuff like, well, who else was in your room? Let's go look at the security cameras. Let's go check out and see who it could have been. And now it's like, hey, you and I are the Hardy Boys together. We're going to solve this crime. So most people think, he's just going to let it go, whatever. No, I'm keeping going down the rabbit hole to make you feel more uncomfortable, to hopefully have you admit it, or at least figure out more of what really happened.
I remember, like, years ago, I was hanging out with a girl, and she lived in Alabama. This was probably my early to mid 20s, I think. And I've told this story before. I don't know if I've ever told it on the podcast, but now that you just shared this, I think it'll be, it's relating to what I'm about to say. Is I saw this, like, I think it was like a $500 or $600 Western Union charge on one of my credit cards. I remember, like, the only person I was with in the last like day or two was her, and I texted her and I was like, hey. She texted me, was like, hey, did you make it home? And I said, yeah, like, blah blah blah. And I said, but there's this random like Western Union charge on my credit card. And she was like, oh no, like trying to play kind of dumb. And I knew, as a former drug addict, like, what would scare the crap out of me, because I had this gut feeling, like, after getting home, I was like, oh, I think something was off. I said, don't worry, I've called the police, or I'm going to call the police.
Right, yeah.
And they're
Great
gonna
line. Great. I love that. Yeah.
And they're going to figure out where this charge came from. And then immediately she's like, oh my God, no, it was me. Don't do that. And then she, like, told me what happened. And she had ended up when I was in the bathroom, no, I was in the shower, she wrote down all the credit card numbers in my wallet. Yeah, it's like what you said about, really digging deep and asking a question that will get them to like really think about the consequences is like the best thing you can do. Like I was like, what can I say that will really like get this person to tell me the truth? And yeah, it's wild, but I think like it's it's so hard for people, especially when it's a family member, a friend, or a loved one, to stay calm when they know somebody is lying to them, because again, our egos get in the way, our emotions get in the way, and you end up, you know, getting super angry, super upset or whatever. And then like if it's a family member and you have an opportunity to like kind of right the wrong, if you will, and get them to admit that they lied or whatever, and then you move on, you kind of destroy that if you get super emotional. So how do you, like, what tips do you have for staying like emotionally cool, calm, and collected during stressful situations?
I mean, I always think of the long game. I'm always like, everything I do, play the long game. So again, going back to the car thing, guy flips me off. I flip him off. We get in a road rage incident. He tries to hit me with a bat. I take out my gun and shoot him to protect myself from him trying to kill me with a baseball bat. And I've just killed the guy because I didn't swallow my pride, right? Avoiding bad situations. So thinking the long game. So the family member, it's like, all right, do we want to get in a shouting match? Do we never want to talk again? Do we never want to do this? So it's not like you're never, ever going to get those emotions. I still get them. Every human being gets them, right? Inside, you're seething and angry, not happy, but you have to logically think it is going to do no good. As soon as you start accusing, as soon as you start yelling, people, what do? They clam up, they get defensive. You get no information out of them. So you need to play more like the detective, calm, like, okay, if you didn't take my wallet, who do you think might have? I mean, that's what works. And that's what it is by thinking long term, always playing the long game.
I think your most popular video, or one of them, is how to respond to somebody when they're staring at you, like they have bad intentions. And I think, people's safety and people's livelihood is often something that people think about a lot, especially if they're, walking around a city they're not familiar with, or maybe they're walking home from work, or whatever the case may be. Um, let's just say someone doesn't have anything with them to defend themselves. Um, what can, like, first of all, how does somebody know that the person who's staring at them just doesn't have a quote unquote staring problem? They actually, have some bad intention with that. And then on the back end of that, what's the best thing somebody can do in that situation?
There's an old saying, the only people who stare at you who overstare are either cops or criminals. So the cop is obviously staring you up and down to see if you're doing anything wrong. So if the person overstaring you isn't a police officer in a police uniform, then you're probably getting sized up by a criminal, because it goes back to normal human behavior. If you and I meet on the streets, we look at each other for a split second, we break eye contact because it is weird and not normal human behavior to overstare. So if somebody's overstaring you, they're sizing you up. They're thinking, should I go up and rob that guy? Should I follow them out of the Walmart parking lot to their car and carjack them? Um, Walking with confidence. Yes, that's the world's easiest thing. And yes, everybody's heard that a million times, but it works. Criminals pick up that sixth sense when you're walking with a purpose, move with a purpose. Also, when you look at them, again, you're not looking at them like you're like, I'm looking back at you and I'm angry, but you can look at them, acknowledge them, and just smile. Hey, how you doing? Because if a criminal is staring you down, you're like, oh my gosh, and start walking quickly, and you're like, oh my god, okay, you just made yourself look like the world's easiest victim, and now they know, okay, that guy's going to be a piece of cake, that girl's going to be a piece of cake. But if you look at them and you say, hey man, what's going on, or hey, how you doing? They're like, that guy spotted me. He's confident. He probably won't be the world's easiest victim. When my wife was in law school, we lived in Baltimore City, Maryland. Super dangerous city, super corrupt city. I hate that city. A lot of violence, right? Just always like one of the top 5 most dangerous cities in the US. Well, I was sized up all the time there, and I did just what I said multiple times. I was one of the few people I knew that was not robbed, didn't have their car broken into, or didn't have something happen to them.
I live in Baltimore City.
You do now? For some reason, I thought you lived in New York or something.
No,
Okay,
no, 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 no. No,
wait, do you actually live in the city?
I'm like 15 minutes north of the city. We talked about this, I think, didn't we?
All right, wait. So where is it? I can't remember where you are. You
like Towson, like Lutherville, Timonium, like Towson area.
All right. Well, you're in the good area. You're not like Baltimore. I was literally in Baltimore City, in the inner city. So
That's funny. But so like what if somebody gives them like this awkward stare that you're talking about? Like so is the best thing that somebody can do like do they run? If
I mean,
somebody
just do what I said. You look at them, you acknowledge them. Hey, how you doing? And you keep walking confidently with a purpose. You don't walk faster. You don't walk slower. You just, keep walking normal with a purpose, and you acknowledge them. So they're like, that guy already saw me. He already saw my face. He saw everything. I can't sneak up on him and grab him from behind or whatever.
Yeah, and is there a way for people like do you have any tips on like posture techniques for how people should walk? I mean, is it like chest up, shoulders back, like stuff like that?
It is. It's what our moms told us 1,000 times that none of us still do. And we sit and you see me trying to do it here because I still slouch too much. But it really is pop those shoulders back. It makes you stand up straight. It makes you look confident. There was a famous study done. I want to say it was in the 70s or 80s in New York City, and they were these two psychologists took a bunch of pictures of people walking down the street, and they took these pictures into criminals in prison and said, "Who would you rob? Who would you mug? Who would you attack?" And they found out it had almost nothing to do with gender. It didn't matter if you were male or female. It didn't matter how tall or short you were. It was the posture and how they walked, how confident and straight up they looked. So that's one of the simplest things that any human being on earth can do.
You hear people talk about tricks like if they have like a Rolex, they put a different band on it if they're in a big city to avoid being pickpocketed, or you have people have like a throwaway wallet that doesn't have anything in it in case somebody wants to rob them. They just throw whatever the wallet is to them that has nothing in it. Is there specific tips you recommend like that? Are those what I just shared is stuff like that valuable? What would you
Yeah, I
do?
mean, it depends where I'm going, right? If I'm going overseas for some dump, I'm having nothing on me. I'm having no jewelry whatsoever, no watch. I carry my wallet in my front pocket. I will have, we call it a toss wallet, throwaway wallet. We call it a toss wallet. But I'll have a toss wallet that I can toss them that has 20 bucks in it. So going back to a lot of my customers that I do consultations with are very high net worth. I'm like, listen, when you go overseas, take off that fancy Rolex. Have your wife take off that giant diamond ring. Like, take all the stuff. You need to look plain and boring and average. Jeans and a t-shirt. That's it. So it definitely helps.
And let's just say you're being like chased. Like now let's just say this situation has escalated a little bit and you walking past them or walking away from them in a confident way doesn't help. Any tips for how to run or move when someone's chasing you?
Well, I mean, it goes back to going to a public place, going to a store, going somewhere if you see a security guard or whatever. Many years ago, long story short, two men tried to kidnap me. I took off running because I spotted it ahead of time. And when two people are trying to kidnap me, I can run very fast. So in this instance, I didn't have anywhere to go, meaning I didn't have any, there wasn't like a department store like Macy's or whatever. And I just outran them by just going to very difficult places. I mean, I'm weaving in and out of buildings and kind of like a movie thing, but without getting run over and that type of stuff. So when it comes to that, there is really no great answer besides be fast, try and zigzag and make it difficult to follow you. And then if there was a restaurant or somewhere with a big crowd, you can go to safety, obviously go into that.
I mean, this might sound stupid, but does like yelling help during situations like that?
People these days, unfortunately, people these days, right? They're so in their cell phones. They don't want to interfere in other people's business. I train people all the time in escape and evasion, anti-kidnapping. Train this woman and her husband, and I don't know if it was 6 months later after my training or a year later, two men tried to kidnap this woman at a gas station, right? Based on what I taught her, she was able to fight them off. She was fine. But afterwards, we talked about it. She said, Jason, I was screaming help. And when you told me that nobody would help me, I didn't believe it when you were training us and said that nobody would come. But nobody came to help me. She's like a small, petite, blonde woman. And she said I was 100% on my own. Everybody else was just like minding their own business, looking on. Nobody came in to rescue me.
Dang, that's crazy. That's crazy. So yeah, I mean, so is there any kind of like sign language or arm movements that you like kind of teach people to like get
No, I mean, I do a lot of self-defense skills. I mean, I teach them a tremendous amount on that, and that's what saved this woman. And I've had several students over the years who have used as self-defense to save themselves from attacks. Because also, when you are running and that full speed, you're not yelling anything. meaning you're moving so fast, your mind isn't thinking to yell help, your mind isn't thinking to do anything of that. And then if you, like this particular woman I mentioned, she couldn't get away the way they surprised her. She did fight them off and was safe. So it really goes back to know some basic self defense, know where to strike the attacker. That stuff works. I mean, I had a young woman in New York City about 2:30 a.m., completely drunk, had left the club. Guy pinned her up against the wall and tried to rape her. She punched this guy in the throat because that's one of the things I teach. The throat is very vulnerable, no matter how big the guy is, no matter how strong he is. She was a young girl. This guy was twice her size. She punched him in the throat. He went down. She was able to run and hail a taxi cab who took her to a police station. So it goes back to simple strikes that anybody can do, because when you have that incident, you're not going to remember 37 karate, judo, chop, ninja moves. You're going to remember, all right, punch him in the throat type of stuff.
And I know you teach self-defense stuff, and people may be listening to this or watching this, and they'll say something like, well, that'll never happen to me. Like, I live in suburbia, I have dogs, or whatever the example is. Like a 60-second elevator pitch to why everybody should be skilled in some level of self-defense.
I obviously hope it never ever happens to you. I hope it never happens to anyone listening. I've trained thousands of people over the years. A small number have used what I've taught them, the self-defense skills to save their life. And the problem is, out of those thousands of people, that tiny number, you don't know whether you're going to be the thousands who it never happens to or that tiny number. So I've trained billionaires. I've trained just average Americans next door. I train people, again, who've got tens of millions of dollars and people who are barely scraping by. And all varieties have been attacked. So it doesn't matter your net worth. It doesn't matter if you live in inner city Baltimore. It doesn't matter if you live in Beverly Hills. I've had people from all walks of life, and they've had these bad things happen, but they survived because they knew the self-defense skills. So that annoying thing we always see on the news when a bad thing happens, they're like, oh, this neighborhood is safe. I never imagined anybody attacking in this neighborhood. Well, everybody says that, but it can happen anywhere. So pray it never happens to you, but just think, yes, it could happen to me because it happens all over this country.
And talking about, you mentioned the example of like somebody was trying to take advantage of a woman and rape and sexually assault them. Obviously a lot of people in the dating space now are meeting online and they're interacting with people they've never met before. And obviously one of the fears is this person going to be a creep. What do you think is like either a step-by-step process or the fastest way that somebody can identify if someone's a creep or not?
First, you got to get on the phone. This is exactly what I did when I was single. This is what I highly recommend. Of course, everybody these days just wants to text or whatever. Get on the phone. I'll give you the $1 million playbook, and it's super easy. Get on the phone under the guise of playing 20 questions to get to know this person, right? So, hey, I want to play 20 questions real quick before we go on our date. What's your favorite soda? What's your favorite color? And then I would throw in random ones, just like I did with detecting deception. And I would say, hey, tell me last time you keyed a guy's car, right? Or tell me last time you destroyed a guy's property or something. 99% of girls, when I asked this, would like laugh and say, oh, I've never done that. Of course, I've never done that, right? True story. One time I had this girl like pause on the phone. Same thing as like buying time to come up with a lie. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? And, I'm sure it wasn't your fault. I'm sure he deserved it. And she did key a guy's car, this girl. And I'm like, just maybe he did deserve it, but I'm not going to go on a date with you. I'm not going to take that chance. So you can use the detecting deception things over this 20 questions, and you can see like, hey, that's, this guy is a creep or this girl is or whatever. And then of course you meet in a public place. I mean, I would tell people very honestly in a charming, funny way, like, hey, let's meet at this Chili's or let's meet in front of wherever, because I just need to make sure you're not an axe murderer type of thing. And I would use that like exact line, and people would think it was funny. So you've got to make it charming, but there's plenty of ways to weed people out before you actually meet them on that first date.
And let's say it's the opposite. Let's just say like a woman is going on a date with a guy, and maybe she has gotten on the phone and she's identified like, oh, like we had a good conversation, like he seems like legit. But in person, like she starts to pick up, let's just say, she starts to pick up like a weird vibe with this guy. Like what types of what's the difference between somebody being a creep versus like socially awkward? Like I think that because sometimes people who are socially awkward can come across as being creepy.
Right. I mean, it depends on kind of questions he asks. So it's all about the questions a person asks. So are they just socially awkward and they're obviously not great with women and haven't dated a lot? or are they asking too intrusive questions that a normal human being would not ask on a first date? So, like, hey, what's your exact address? Like, what would, like, obviously that's an extreme example, but you have to think about all of us know what normal human behavior is. Most of us have been on dates in our lifetime, right? So is this normal human behavior, or is this person asking way too of intrusive questions? And it's like, okay, something's wrong with this guy. And then you obviously just be polite, end the date, and never talk to him again. So it's all about the baseline. Like, is this normal guy behavior, or is this guy clearly asking too much and something is off with him?
And then is there anything with like the body language that you could pick up on from that could identify whether or not somebody's like super creepy?
Well, I mean, I go back to the lie detection, meaning I have no problem asking people uncomfortable questions. So if I was a woman, a guy, you could say, you know what I think is the worst thing in the world is like a guy who's hit a woman. Have you ever hit a woman? Like, clearly, that's a strong question to ask. What are most guys going to say? Of course not. Like, that's horrible. Like, any guy who hits a woman ought to be taken out back and shot, right? That's going to be more normal answers of a guy's like being just like, oh, of course not. And that's a disgusting thing. So if you see a guy who gets a deer in the headlight looks and is like, well, Bill Clinton, like, what do you consider the definition of hitting a woman? Then obviously you need to get out of Dodge and not date that guy again.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. Like some of the interactions that I've heard from people who have like gone out on dates over the last few years, and I think it's like that's a great thing. Like if you ask somebody a super direct and like obvious answered question, and they just don't say anything, like definitely a massive red flag, right? If they don't respond with yeah, like that's like the most horrific thing in the world. Uh,
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I think it's like people are, I think, afraid of going out and meeting new people because of some of the stories that you do hear or being and stuff like that. And let's just say that like, somebody they're out on a date and they've gotten past like the creepiness part. Like how can somebody like identify if that person is actually telling the truth regarding their intentions?
So I mean, it just throughout the date, I would ask them various questions so you can continually extract information. Meaning, you're not going to sit down and say, "Okay, have you ever hit a woman?" And then your next question be like, "Tell me the last time you stole." And then like you're never going to do those in a row, but you can pepper them in throughout, right? And I'll tell you one of the best ways to extract information is to say it yourself. So you say like, if I want to know if you have kids, I'll say, I got 7 kids, and I've got to take my kid to baseball practice tonight. It's the busiest day. You got any kids by chance? That kind of stuff, right? You volunteer first. In the intelligence business, it's called give to get. So you can start saying things like that, and then you're eliciting information by them, and you can say, okay, this guy's, it's adding up, or it's creepy, or it's weird, or that kind of stuff. So you can volunteer information and say like, hey, again, I've got 5 siblings, and it's great, and it's whatever. You got any siblings? So it's not if you're not comfortable fully just asking straight out, or you can say stuff like, man, I was just thinking, like, looking at that Snickers bar over there. I remember when I stole Snickers bar from the grocery store in 7th grade. Did you ever steal anything? Sounds corny, but if you do it right, it works.
Any other tips that you think people would appreciate regarding like the subject of detecting liars, manipulators, people who are deceitful, etc.?
Always believe the direction the head nods. So if you said to me, hey, Jason, did you really work for the CIA? And I said, yes, I did. Right now, it's not going to be that pronounced where I'm going this way, but we are used to lying with our mouths as human beings, but we're not used to controlling our body, especially the direction of our head. The $1 million example I give on this is many years ago when Hillary Clinton was running for office against Donald Trump the first time, Diane Sawyer did, I think it was a 60 Minutes interview with her. And Diane Sawyer said something along the lines of like, you and Bill have a very wonderful marriage, don't you? And she was like, oh, yes, it's a great marriage. And you could barely see her head going side to side. So I teach people that when I'm teaching them to say, when you are asking someone, like I ask people, hey, when's the last time you stole something, right? I've had people tell me they never stole anything in their life. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Come on. Everybody's stolen something. You didn't even steal like penny candy from the grocery store. And they're like, no, I've seriously never, ever stolen anything, And I'm watching like, okay, are they going, no, I've never really stolen anything? Or are they going, no, I've never really stolen, I'm watching the direction of their head to be like, no, seriously, Jason, I've never, ever, ever, ever stolen anything in my life. And I'm watching to see what the truth is.
Well, Jason, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I think the listeners and my audience is going to get a lot of value out of this. I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Doug.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I really think you're going to like this video as well. I'll see you there.